Hello and welcome back to the Orlando Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Russ, and today's episode is the Future of Walt Disney World One. So this is, and I say this every single time at this point, this is one of these episodes that I've wanted to do for quite a while. This essentially was a question, or part of this was a question that I got in a Q&A, probably a month ago, if not longer. So I do apologize for having not answered this sooner. And as much as anything, the reason why I haven't is because I feel like it's such a big topic. It's a big topic, and I've deliberated on doing the episode now, or I've deliberated on doing this episode after D23. But I figured, you know what, when D23 comes out, it's going to be kind of like hard evidence and hard and fast rumors and confirmed attractions and rides that potentially might come to Disney World. So I'd rather kind of do an episode on that entirely. This one is a bit more of like a to and fro, a bit more of a conversation, a bit more of a speculation as much as anything about potentially what Disney might do going forward. There's an elephant in the room with regards to Epic Universe. So as we all know, Universal are building a new park. They have built a new park. That new park is coming next year. So in 2025, Epic Universe is going to be Universal's third theme park. It's going to be their fourth park in the area if you count Volcano Bay as well. And with that, they've been really smart. They've basically put IPs and they've put things in the park that they know are going to work. They put things in the park that they know are going to be a big hit and they know are going to get people to go to Epic Universe. That being said, obviously it will take some people away from their own parks. That's a given. It will take some people away from Islands of Adventure and Universal Studios. Universal Studios probably more than IOA, because IOA has got things like Velocicoaster and Hagrid's going for it, whereas Universal, maybe in terms of bigger rides, hasn't got as much anymore, but it's still got a lot of classic rides. So as I was saying, Universal have got their park and they know that it's going to take some business away from their other parks, but also what they'll be basically trying to count on is that they're going to take some business away from Disney as well. There is no doubt in my mind that they will do that. There's no doubt that they will take business away from Disney, because suddenly Universal Resort and Universal Orlando Resort turns into a holiday on its own potentially. Like you could go for a week, 10 days, and you could do 2 days in each park with a rest day in between and stuff. And like suddenly you filled out your days with just Universal parks, which is fantastic. And like, you know, I'm a big Universal fan by all means, but there hasn't necessarily ever been that before. Like I would argue that I don't think there's enough going for Universal and Islands of Adventure and Volcano Bay to go and do a 2-week holiday in just those parks. You could go and have a fantastic time. There is no doubt. But I would say that you basically would be filling other days with potentially other parks. You'd be going to Disney. You'd be doing stuff in and around Orlando as well. However, on the flip side of that, you've got Walt Disney World Resort and you've got 4 major theme parks. You've got water parks as well. You've got Disney Springs. Like you could go and have a holiday in Walt Disney World alone for 2 weeks, and I think you would be busy every single day. You would never be scratching around for stuff to do, so to speak. But with Epic Universe going to Universal, they've kind of bucked the trend. They're gonna change that slightly. And like I said, they've been so clever with what they are putting in the parks. As I was saying, they've got Harry Potter, which is in Universal Studios. They've got Harry Potter, which is in Islands of Adventure, and they're huge hits. They're huge draws for the park as well. The next thing you've got is Dark Universe. They know that Dark Universe is going to be an absolute smash out of the park because people have been calling for this for so long. If people keep asking for it, ultimately you've got to listen at some point. And I'm sure we'll get onto that with Disney as well in a minute. But the other things they've got in there, they've obviously got like the Celestial Park area. So they've gone with a non-IP area, which again looks fantastic. They've gone for dueling coasters. They've been smart enough to listen to what people miss and what people wanted back from their previous rides and previous attractions with regards to like Islands of Adventure and Dueling Dragons. They've gone for a fairly big IP in How to Train Your Dragon. Like How to Train Your Dragon is quite a big series of films. There's 3 films in the series. I know that they're doing a live action one as well in the future. So it's a franchise that is fairly strong. It's a franchise that will basically stand the test of time for a good few years for sure. And it appeals to children, but it also appeals to adults as well. I think ultimately they're good films, so they've been smart with putting that in there as well, and they've had success from it from their other parks around the world. The final one that they've got going into Epic Universe, they've gone for Super Mario. So obviously that isn't necessarily a universal brand. It's a bit like the Harry Potter deal where they're kind of having to work with Nintendo for a start and to basically get the rights for it. And I appreciate they might have produced the film for the Super Mario Brothers film last year, but it's an absolute result. It's a win for everyone involved. Like the fact that they have managed to get one of the biggest game franchises ever into a park. And if you look at the Super Mario Land from around the world, that there are other parks, it's gonna be amazing. It really, really is. And like I said, they've just been so smart with what they've done with these attractions, with these IPs, that they know people are going to go there. There's no question. There's absolutely no question. People will go to this park for these IPs that they put in there. So with that being said, what do Disney need to do? Do Disney need to react? Is the first question. Well, I think yes. I think ultimately they do need to react. However, like Disney as a company are an absolute juggernaut. They are one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. They're one of the biggest companies in the world. They know what they're doing. They bring $40 billion worth of revenue into Florida every single year. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely absurd numbers. Like they kill it. They absolutely smash it out of the park. And like as we all know, because we keep going back there, that they do something so different to anywhere else, anywhere. They make magic. They really, really do. But the thing is, they're gonna look at it and be like, well, we want to keep growing. They're a business. They're going to want growth. They're going to want to keep growing. They're going to want to keep doing more revenue every single year. But you put something like Epic Universe in the mix, and suddenly not as many people might go to Walt Disney World for as long, for example. So the fact that Epic Universe is there means that Disney do have to react in some way, shape, or form. Ultimately, the business for both parks is going to go up, and it's going to continue to go up over the years because that's business. But Disney are going to want to make sure that they steal the march back off of Universal. They're not going to want Universal, and they're saying they're not going to sit back and watch Universal take their business away. They're going to react. Now, what I will say, and as we all know with the Tron saga, is that Disney are not necessarily the quickest at doing these things. Universal are rapid. They get an idea, and to be fair to them, they might have had an idea 7 years ago, but they keep it quiet, and then when it comes to doing it, they're in a position that they can do it. Whereas I think Disney kind of a little bit with D23, and they did this a few years ago, that they kind of went hard on their announcements. They went, we're going to do X, we're going to do Y, we're going to do Z, we're going to do all these things. And then suddenly they build so much hype and it's amazing. And then 3 years later, when they haven't done it, then you get disappointment. You get a bit of disbelief as well. You get a bit of, well, you're just saying it for the sake of it. You're not actually doing it. So, like I said, there's a lot to be said for Disney wanting to react to Epic Universe. So, in terms of how will they react? I mean, this is not a thing that's going to happen immediately. It's just not. And they have put a couple of wheels in motion with regards to Test Track getting an update, with regards to Dinosaur getting an update. They've been fairly smart. They've been fairly smart that they've looked at 2 rides in their parks and gone, you know what? These are 2 rides that potentially need an update. They're potentially 2 rides that have maybe had their time for now. So they're popular rides. People are always going to want to go on them, but we probably could put something more current in their space. And the thing is, they're likely just to be rethemes. Whatever they put in them with Dinosaur, there's a lot of rumors of it being Indiana Jones or it being maybe Encanto. And the same with Test Track. I think Test Track's going to still remain the same kind of style. It's still going to be the car. It's still going to be like the same track and all the same layout and stuff. But I think it will certainly get a heavy retheme to what it is at the moment, because I do think that the two of them, they do need this update. So in terms of Disney reacting, I think that is their reaction. I think that's the quickest reaction they can do. It's the quickest thing they can do, which isn't building a new ride, because building a new ride, it takes time. It takes time, it takes money, it takes space is the other thing. It causes disruption. It causes disruption in your park. It causes disruption wherever you put it. And they've got to take all of these things into account before they go, you know what, we're going to do it. So there's the route of going for an update, and that's exactly what Disney are doing at the moment. But beyond that, there's expansion. So in terms of Disney going, you know what, we're going to expand on our parks. Well, which parks can they expand on? Which parts can they expand on which will basically be a reaction? Because the thing is, and just kind of like going off on tangents here, if Disney believe that Universal were going to just do Epic Universe and then sit back and watch and just kind of wait for the business to come in, they're wrong, because you can see how Universal operate. Universal are proactive. They're fast. They try and listen to people. And I will say that their rides are not always a hit, because they're certainly not. If we think of like Fast and Furious, they've had more misses over the years than Disney have. That is for certain. But they've also had some really, really big hits. So in terms of Universal finishing Epic Universe and then just sitting back, it's not going to happen. They're basically going to go, right, we've done Epic Universe. We're going straight into, for example, we're going to go straight into studios. We're going to go straight into studios, and that space where Fear Factor is, we're going to knock it down, and we're going to put a new land or ride in this area. It's going to happen. If they don't do that area, they're going to go straight over to Islands of Adventure, and they're going to go, right, Lost Continent, sadly, it's had its time. It's had its time. It's had its day. And they're going to go and do that. So you can be rest assured that basically Universal are in a position where they have the space. They've got the opportunity to basically move straight from one project to another with very little disruption. They could basically do a build in where Fear Factor is, and it completely have no effect on the park whatsoever. And the same with Lost Continent, to be honest with you. They could shut off that area of the park and you could still get around the park fairly easily. So they're going to do it. They're going to carry on moving. So Disney basically, with their updates of Dinosaur and Test Track, are doing their first move. They're moving their pieces on the chessboard as well, but they do need to have something else in the pipeline ready for after those. So this is where I was getting onto expansions. And in terms of which parks can even have expansions, well, for a start, and I think I might have mentioned these before, Magic Kingdom, and this is a fun fact, and I didn't necessarily know this, is the smallest park in Walt Disney World. It is the smallest part, but it's the busiest part. Obviously, it's the most congested. There's a lot in there in a small space. So does that park need an update? I would argue it probably needs an update in terms of an expansion somewhere. Apparently, there is room for expansion in the park. I think it's kind of like the back corner of the park. There is room. There is room. Will they do it? Will they go, you know what, we're gonna put an expansion in Magic Kingdom? I'm not sure. But there is room to do it. The next part they've got room, Animal Kingdom. Animal Kingdom is the biggest park. It's the biggest park in Walt Disney World. And probably not a surprise, because obviously a lot of it's made up of like Greenland. So there's an awful lot of space that doesn't have a lot in. They have ample room to put an expansion in there of some sort. I don't think it would be the worst idea for them to do so. Obviously, they've done big projects in there previously with like Avatar, but I think an expansion in Animal Kingdom could also be a shout. The other part that apparently there is room for an expansion is Hollywood Studios. Hollywood Studios obviously has had an expansion previously with regards to Batuu and Galaxy's Edge. So will they do an expansion there? Probably less likely. Probably less likely, in my opinion. So in terms of where they would do it, and apparently, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't really room in Epcot necessarily to do an expansion. Obviously, they've done the Guardians of the Galaxy bit most recently. I think if there's going to be an expansion of a park anywhere, it's going to be Magic Kingdom. I can't see it not being Magic Kingdom. But that being said, Magic Kingdom, they could leave it, literally do nothing to it, and people will flock to that park day on day. Like without even a question, that will happen. That 100% happen. But from Disney's point of view, if they put an expansion in the park, they can potentially bring more people into the park, but also they can disperse crowds a little bit as well. So in terms of a customer satisfaction point of view, it may be beneficial for them to put an expansion in this park just to give people more space, give people more room, give people more attractions, give people a new draw to go to the park. A lot of people might not go to Magic Kingdom based on the fact that they think it's for children, or it's more geared to children, which is fine. And it's like it's more the classic Disney park, isn't it? It's the original. But some people may steer clear of going to Magic Kingdom as much because they don't feel like there is as much for them to do. And that's kind of where I've stood on Magic Kingdom a little bit. And it's why I haven't done it as much in recent years. I love the park. I think it's a fabulous park. Like, do not get me wrong on that. But I do think in terms of what there is in the park that appeals to me personally, there is less in that park than there is in potentially Hollywood Studios or Epcot from a personal standpoint. So if they were to pick an IP and go, you know what, we're going to do an expansion, we're going to put a land in this park of some sort, I think it's a hit. And I think it could well be the move. I think it could be the next big move that Disney do. But I'm speculating here. And this is the fun about this episode. I don't know. And ultimately none of us know. And when it comes to D23, we might get a bit more of an idea. But I think if they're going to do an expansion, I think it will be Magic Kingdom. I think it will make sense to do so. And I'm here for it ultimately. Alongside that, and like I said, there's the test track update, there is the dinosaur update. Those are happening. They're already happening. They're going to be done by the time Epic Universe opens. Those are going to be done. So they're going to be wanting an update happening next year. And whether or not that does end up being an expansion, I don't know. But they might look to try and do potentially other updates of rides in the parks as well. So I was having a little look in terms of like what rides could be updated, and I think that they've generally that they've picked two of the rides that needed updating the most, in my opinion. The other ride that potentially, in my mind, could do with an update is Rockin' Roller Coaster. I think it's good. I think it's good, but I would say that I don't know whether or not, maybe for me, it could do with an update at this point. It to me feels a little dated, but and some people love that. And like, don't get me wrong, like, again, I'm not hating on the ride. It's a great ride, but I just think that sometimes you've got to stay up to date. You've got to stay with the trends. You've got to keep people coming back for certain things. And some stuff is untouchable. Don't get me wrong, but also at times stuff is untouchable, and then it does get updated, and then people go, you know what, it was the right move. It was the right move. But I don't know. So there is that, and also with regards to some of the lands in World Showcase in Epcot, certainly a few of those have space in them to be able to do updates on potentially the attractions that they do have in their areas. So there is scope for sure for some of these rides to get updates. The other one is Space Mountain, as we've discussed quite a few times on previous episodes at this point. Space Mountain is an absolute staple ride, but I think quite a lot of people avoid it nowadays, and it's a shame. And I think people avoid it because unfortunately it has begun to show its age. It has become a little bit more rough. It's become less of a must-do attraction that it was potentially 10 to 15 years ago, in my opinion again. So where did Disney go? What did Disney do beyond potential expansions, beyond potential updates of parks? Obviously, they can put new rides into parks. And in terms of space in parks, it's difficult because these rides and these parks have been here for quite a while now. So, you know, if they've had space, they've generally always built on it. But that's not to say there isn't space. There always will be somewhere and something they can put in a park somewhere if they really, really put their mind to it. Again, I go back to kind of Universal. Like, if you looked at Islands of Adventure, you might not necessarily thought that they'd have got Velocicoaster in where it is, but you know, they've been smart. They've put some of it over the lake and they've tucked it in behind the Discovery Center. They've been clever. They've been clever with the space they've got and where they've put it. So it might be that Disney need to be a little bit smart with that. And if there were a type of ride, and again, this is totally my opinion, if there were a type of ride that I think Disney might need to pull the trigger on, I think they might need a roller coaster. And I think they might need a big roller coaster. Like, I would argue in terms of children's attractions and young attractions for younger people, I think that they've got them in abundance. I think in terms of nostalgic rides, they've got them in abundance. But in terms of thrill rides, they've got simulators, they've got screen-based rides, they've got all sorts, they've got shows, they've got you know, the lot. But I don't think in terms of a thrill roller coaster, I don't think that they have much going for them. And I think it's the move. I'm a big theme park and a big roller coaster fan, so I am biased. But I think if they were to pull the trigger on a big roller coaster, I think it would be a hit. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that that would potentially be the way to go in terms of an attraction for Disney. But that being said, the next thing I wanted to basically get on, and as we're on kind of speculation and talking about what could Disney do, I wanted to get onto kind of the main part of this episode. And the main part of this episode was, would Disney build a fifth gate at Walt Disney World? Well, I had a little bit of research. I did a bit of research and I basically read into whether or not Disney would do it, whether or not Disney could do it. And for the past couple of years, there's been a bit of like a lawsuit going on, a bit of like a to and fro going. Like, I won't get into the details of it, but basically it was potentially that Disney wouldn't have the facility to be able to make a park if they wanted to. They could, you know, they can do whatever they want in their own parks, but they might not be able to build a new park. Well, that seemingly is kind of buried a hatchet on it, and they can do it. They did commit, I think it was earlier this year, they committed that they were going to spend £17 billion over the next few years on updating Walt Disney World. That could involve a new park. So there is space for a fifth park. Apparently they own the space. As any of you will know from driving in and around Disney, the site is ginormous. So they have space. They've got the space already. It's not like when Universal wanted to do it, they had to go and acquire more land because they needed the space. Disney have it. Disney have got the property. Disney can do it if they want to do it. Will they do it? Well, I think ultimately, on research and my personal opinion, they're going to do it. It's going to happen, but it probably won't happen immediately. This is the kind of thing, if they do it, and if they basically turn around in the next couple of years and say they're going to do it, I would expect this to probably happen by like 2033. It's a while away. It's a while away if they're going to do it, but I think within the next 10 years, it'll happen. I think within the next 10 years, they'll come to a point where they have to do it. Their IPs keep growing, their custom keeps growing, their call for more rides will keep growing as well. So in terms of a fifth park at Walt Disney World, what could they do? What could they do and what would they do is the other thing. Like, and ultimately, I think personally, and this is me speculating, if I were to do it, I think you've got to go fairly IP heavy. In my opinion, I think if you're going to get people to go into a new park, a little bit like Epic Universe, you've got to pick hard and fast attractions that you know and can guarantee are going to get people to buy a ticket to go through that gate. So what would I put there? Well, you've got to think of things that are going to be potentially relevant as well. So it's all well and good. I could say, like, put a Wish attraction there. Like, Wish is a film that came out last year for Disney, but are they going to potentially put an attraction in there for Wish in 10 years time? I can't see it because yeah, it's been a fairly big film in the last year or two, but it's not necessarily their biggest film. It's not their biggest franchise. It's unlikely they're going to do a second film. Why are they going to do it? They're not. So they're probably going to pick bigger franchises that potentially have had 1, 2, 3 films in their franchise and beyond, and potentially with future plans as well. So I was having a little look into what Disney own, and Disney own a lot. Don't get me wrong, Disney own a lot of entertainment. So, what do I think would be good for Disney to put into a fifth park? Well, the first land, if I were to pick a land, if I were to basically split this into potentially 5 or 6 lands, the first land that I would put in this park would be Narnia. And then this might be totally bizarre. A lot of you might not even know that Disney own the Chronicles of Narnia franchise. These are some of the biggest and the biggest selling books of all time. Now, I will say that the films haven't necessarily been the biggest hit, but there is a lot of talk that they're going to do a Disney Plus series for Chronicles of Narnia. I think it's a shout. I think it's an absolute shout to do, and I think it lends itself to a theme park brilliantly. I think you could basically do some really, really exciting attractions, really exciting themed areas based on Narnia. I think you could have a giant animatronic Aslan. I think there's a lot they can do, and it's this magical fantasy land as much as anything as well, which is totally Disney. So I think for me, I think Narnia would be a good shout. I think it's a little bit different. It's a little bit kind of like it's a little bit left field. It's not necessarily what everyone would expect there to be, but I think when getting people in there, I think people would love it. But I think they would need to precede it with a successful Disney Plus series or film series prior to pulling the trigger on it. The next thing I would do, and I know that they've got this in other Disney parks around the world, but I would go full Frozen. I would go Arendelle. I think by having an Arendelle section, like a big themed Arendelle section, and you can see like Elsa's ice palace up in the distance and stuff, a little bit like what Hogwarts is in Islands of Adventure. I think you can kind of have the ice palace up in the distance. I think having Arendelle would be really cool. There is another Frozen film being made in the next year or two. There's been a lot of talk of there being a live action Frozen film at some point in the next kind of like 5, 6 years. So I think in terms of the franchise, and this is one of Disney's biggest franchises as well, I think for them to pull the trigger on Arendelle would be massive. That's if they don't put it in a park before then. I'm amazed they haven't in Orlando. I'm absolutely amazed they haven't, because it's so big. The first 2 films, they're both over $1 billion films. I'm certain of it. They're in the. I'm pretty sure Frozen 2's in the top 10 biggest films of all time. So you've got to pull the trigger on something like that, in my opinion. The other thing I potentially could lean towards, and I don't know whether or not they do it in a new park. I think it would probably lend itself to going somewhere like Animal Kingdom, a Moana land. Moana is coming out later in this year, in November. There's a live action one coming next year as well. Like, this is a franchise that's only going up. The first film is hugely successful, and I think that is the kind of IP that can go into a park and be really, really good. And I think they can do some cool cultural representation as much as anything with that brand of film, and I think that could be really exciting. The next thing that I would put in a fifth gate at Disney would be another Star Wars land. And a lot of you might groan and be like, oh, another one? Like, no, I think a bit like what Universal again have done with Harry Potter. I think Star Wars is huge. Like, Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises of all time, and it will remain that forever. It doesn't matter what Star Wars put out, whether or not you are a big fan or you're not of the TV series that they've put out over the last kind of 3 or 4 years. Some of them are hugely successful, some of them are not. And I know that some of the hard fans of Star Wars might not like some of the series, but one series that's been so successful is The Mandalorian. And I would put a Star Wars based land on Mandalorian and Grogu. I think it lends itself again, and I think because they're current stories, I think that it draws a lot of people. Obviously, you know, the hard fans of Star Wars might want to see like Tatooine or like things that go back to the original films, but I think I think the time might have gone for it. I think we've got to move on from it, and I think we've got to go with what the current Star Wars is. And I know not everyone's mad on that with Galaxy's Edge, but I think if you were to go Mandalorian, I think that's the way to do it. Personally, I think that'd be exciting, and also people will go there because it's Star Wars themed. That is an absolute given. People will go there. The last section that I would put in a fifth gate at Disney, and this is a little bit like with Universal, one that's been called on for so long at this point, is Disney villains. You've got to go Disney villains. I'm actually amazed they haven't tried to do this already, because people will love it. And I've said this before about films. Films are successful based on obviously the storyline, but also if you've got a good villain in a story, it makes a film. It really, really does. And Disney have had and made some of the best villains that there are in any films anywhere. So pull the trigger on it. You could have Cruella de Vil, you could have Mother Gothel, you could have Scar, Shere Khan, Ursula, Jafar, Captain Hook. The list goes on. And I think it would be such a cool area. I think the meet and greets would be wicked. I think like the theming of the land could be fantastic. That's the way I'd go. That's what I would do, and that's what I would do in a Disney park. I didn't want to like create rides. I know that I did like in the Marvel episode, I did this whole episode on speculating what rides they might bring. I didn't want to necessarily do that in this one. I wanted to stick to kind of the lands and the ideas of what I would put in a park. But I want to know what you guys think as well. I want to know what things you would all put in a park. What lands would you put in there? What if Disney went, right, here's the fifth park, but we need 5 ideas. We need 5 ideas of lands to put in it. What would you put in there? And, you know, we could have a heck of a conversation with regards to like what things you think Disney could update in the coming years. So hit me up on Instagram. Hit me up, because I love these conversations. I love a speculation. But like I said, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. As much as anything, it's kind of me just kind of throwing ideas out there, throwing ideas of potentially what could happen in the future and when it might happen as well. I always enjoy these episodes. I always enjoy the kind of like doing a little bit of research and finding out potentially what is doable, what is going on in and around the kind of like Disney bubble, and what's going on in and around Orlando as well. So there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be said for these kind of topics. I think there is definitely going to be a Disney D23 episode coming in the coming month or so. Once that drops, I will try and get on it straight away to share all the information and my thoughts on what D23 announces. But I hope you've all enjoyed this one. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been good fun to listen to a bit of speculation about what Disney might do in the coming months and coming years. Thank you all as ever. Thank you all so much for listening, for sharing, for supporting this channel. And I keep saying this, but Orlando Adventures podcast is flying. Genuinely, and it baffles me a little bit, but I couldn't do it without all of you. So thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you all in the next one.